Do you agree with the statement that the United States deliberately adds fuel to the fire of conflicts around the world in order to allow American military-industrial complex to make profit from what's happening?
Well, not only do I agree with it, history shows that I didn't come up with that idea, and neither did you. A guy named Dwight Eisenhower came up with that idea. He was the commander-in-chief of the American military forces in Europe during World War II. He went on to become the president of the United States. In his farewell address to the American people, he warned us about the military-industrial complex and the relationship it had with Congress, and that this confluence of money and greed would destroy America because it would lead us down the path where we had to be in a perpetual state of warfare to make the Military-Industrial Commission profitable for those who needed the profits, namely Congress. It was the end of American democracy, and history has proven him 100% correct.
Why do you think that over the decades of American invasions and the destruction of other states, particularly no one from the military and political leadership of the United States has been brought to justice for war crimes?
Well, first of all, war crimes is about jurisdiction. I mean, there's no jurisdiction in the world that can try Americans. None. In fact, we passed a law a while back that said if the International Criminal Court tried to try Americans, we could invade and liberate the Americans, that it just won't be allowed to happen because we are America. What do you mean, why? We're America. God has touched us. We have a God-given right to lead. God bless America. Everybody says it. God bless America. What does that mean? Does God damn the rest of the world? Does he not put the same blessings on us all? No, not if you're an American. God only blesses us. We are the nation that has been imbued with divine manifest destiny, not only to conquer our continent and impose our will on our northern and southern neighbors, but the world belongs to us. We are the only ones that have the vision of what genuine democratic governance is. We are the only ones who know the difference between right and wrong. And therefore, we have a God-given duty to go forth like crusaders and impose our will, because it's God's will. Not our will, it's God's will on the rest of the world. What do you mean, why? There's no collection of subhuman species out there capable of judging Americans. Only Americans can be judged, and we can only be judged by fellow Americans. But even then, we are protected because we can't be charged with crimes against the colonials. Because that's what the world is. We're the American empire. We're the colonial empire. The world is our colonial subjects. They must do what we demand of them. Their economies must be subordinated to our economy. Think about it. What is it, 340 million Americans today? Somewhere around there? What percentage of the world's population is that? The answer is very, very small. And yet, what percentage of the world's resources do we consume? This very, very small group of people consumes over 25% of the world's resources. We consume it. Now, how do we afford that? Well, yeah, I know we can print money anytime we want, but the real way we afford it is that we ensure that the world supplies us with the resources we need at prices we demand. And if you ever want to get in the business of fair competition, where you're seeking a balance, which puts this wonderful system we have and put the rules-based international order, we call it the rules-based international order, the rules we put in to ensure we can acquire your resources at prices that benefit us while causing you economic harm. But we don't care about you. That's the other thing. America is a friend of nobody. Nobody. Name one nation we're friends with. Not. Because friends don't treat friends this way. There's nobody out there we're friends with. We claim to be, but we're not. We spy on all of our friends. We undermine all of our friends. And God forbid if a friend steps up and says, hey, I got a question, then we destroy them. We undercut them. Let's look at our good friend Germany. Our really good, gosh, the Germans have been our friend for a while, I think. Even when we occupied them at the end of the Second World War, And people have to remember why we occupied them, because they didn't used to be a good country. They used to be called Nazi Germany. It used to be the Third Reich, and they perpetrated horrific crimes on all of Europe, especially the Soviet Union and Russia, where 27 million people lost their lives because of this odious ideology. We occupied them, but then we became friends with them. We had our forces on there. We had military bases. I was stationed there as a kid. My dad was stationed in Germany. I graduated from high school there. I saw the occupation firsthand, and I saw the friendly relations we had with the Germans. Well, they were our friends only insofar as they allowed our troops free access to their soil to confront the Soviet threat. When the Cold War ended and the Germans started to say, why are all these Americans here? They stopped being our friends because they dared question us. And then when the Germans said, wow, we want our economy to thrive, therefore we would like to acquire natural gas on a consistent basis at a reasonable price. And the Russians were providing that. And we said, no, you can't do that. And in the end, when our German friends said, but it's in our best interest to be able to do this, we blew up their pipeline, because we're not friends with anybody. Anybody who crosses us, in the end, will find out that what American friendship means is we can shoot you, blow you up, bomb you, destroy you anytime we want to.
That was very powerful. After Joe Biden came to power, the militarization of the American police has significantly increased, including the expansion of the 1033 program, which allows the transfer of surplus military equipment to the needs of local police departments. Tell us what this can signal and what it can lead to.
I will say that I am not an expert in the development of policing policies in the United States. I do know that a lot of the laws are derived from how we treated escaped slaves and the return of property, and so a lot of these laws had inherent inhumanity built into them. The American police have never let's contrast for a second the British. The British, I mean, things are changing today. The British are carrying guns more and more because of terrorism, etc. But basic British policing is premised on the notion that society respects the police. So when a police officer shows up and they cuff you, it doesn't mean they cuff you. It means they put their hand on you. And the second they cuff you, you stop. And it's, come along, son. And they take you off to, and you are subjected to justice. British cops, they have a billy club, a nightstick. So if you misbehave and you want to fight, they'll fight you, pop, but no guns, because that's just not the way they think. The cops are not at war with society. The cops are part of society, and the society respects them as part of the society. They don't view them as inherently evil. Here in America, the American people are the enemy. When a police officer goes out on his daily beat, he's not protecting his community. He's at war with his community. That's the mindset. All of the training. The other thing is, let's talk about European police. Let's talk about German police for a second. They receive more training on how not to shoot somebody, how to de-escalate a problem so that force of arms doesn't have to be used, than we do for the totality of our training. Our cops are the least trained cops in the world. We have zero standards. I mean, I'll tell you how bad it is. We can take a kid who graduates from high school, but if you're carrying a gun and every time you approach an American citizen, you are fearful and you feel a need to hold your gun or you're in the wrong line of business. Get out, quit. We have to stop this mindset, because what it leads to is police violence against the citizens. That's just a matter of fact. By militarizing the police, you are literally creating an occupation force in America, where the American people are no longer the masters of their domain. They are prisoners to this horrific, brutal, thuggish force that is not constrained by the rule of law, because cops make their own law. I'll make the statement, and I challenge any police officer to contradict me, because you can't. And you know it's true. You may be a good cop when you join the force. You may think you're going to do good. But within a month, you're going to have to lie for somebody, a fellow officer. Because cops don't turn cops in. You're going to lie when you see something wrong. And as soon as you lie, you're ruined. You're done. You're no longer a good cop. And the lie becomes a lie, becomes a lie, becomes a lie. And soon you're the one doing bad stuff, expecting people to lie. And soon nobody is holding to you account, because everybody is a liar, and you can do whatever you want to do, including beating up people, shooting people, planting evidence, because it's no longer about the law. It's about you, this thug with a badge who walks through American society believing he or she can do anything they want because they're not held to account. That's not policing. That's the worst kind of dictatorial occupation army you can imagine. And what's worse is that the court system tends to back them up. Prosecutors tend to turn a blind eye. The only reason why these bad cops are I will tell you this, if there was no videotape of George Floyd being murdered, no cop would have been held to account. If there was no videotape of that guy who died in Memphis being murdered, no cop would have been held to account, because police don't turn in police. Every police officer there witnessed murder. And if there was no videotape, nothing would have happened, because cops don't care about the rule of law when it applies to them, because they are an illegal occupation army, and that's that. And if we don't fix it, this country's going to go to hell. Excuse my language. It's already in hell. Imagine living in the inner cities, fearful of cops. You can't even approach a cop because he'll touch his gun because he's concerned. Why is this guy coming close to me? Gosh, I don't know. Maybe I want to ask directions. Because you're a police officer. You're supposed to be officer friendly. That's the way I grew up. Officer friendly. You can always go to officer friendly because he'll help you. And if you're a black kid today and you approach officer friendly, he's going to shoot you, and they're going to let him get away with it because he had a right to fear a black guy approaching him. That's just a lot wrong in America today. Look, don't. There's a guy, Patrick Skinner, I think his name is. He was a CIA officer who then went on to become a police officer. He serves. Down in the South, I think in North Carolina somewhere. I could be wrong on that. And he does a blog where he talks about the difficulties of policing, but how much he loves being part of the community, the importance of a community-based approach. And he was trying hard to educate. And when he saw what happened in Memphis, he said, I can't be a cop anymore. I can't. He said, it just, because that's the reality. He knows the truth. He knows the truth, that he is the exception, not the rule. No matter how much he struggles to try and make things right, the reality is policing in America is fundamentally broken. Every cop is a bad cop. Every cop, because they have had to turn a blind eye. They have been silent when police officers abuse the very citizens they're supposed to protect.
Please evaluate the policy of the current American president. Why, in your opinion, is he not interested in problems within his country, but provides significant financial assistance to the other states?
Well, one of the... let me back up here just a second. We're talking about Joe Biden.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Biden is one of the most fundamentally flawed American politicians that have ever been elected to office. He's one of the most corrupt individuals that have ever been there. What Joe Biden has done in Delaware is create a corrupt machine where he has helped import laws that have helped Delaware thrive, and therefore he is untouchable in Delaware, literally untouchable. You can't touch Joe Biden. He's above the law. And he takes this arrogance and he's brought it with him into the White House, where he is Joe Biden. He is the biggest narcissist the world has ever seen. What Joe Biden says must be it, because Joe Biden is the smartest man. I know. I've dealt with Joe Biden personally, and he is literally the worst politician in America. And yet we elected him president of the United States. And we elected him over the second worst politician in American history, which was Donald Trump. We didn't have much of a choice there, but we elected Joe Biden, literally the dumbest man and the most arrogant man to hold office. So I brought that up because it's hard sometimes to explain American policy under Joe Biden, because when you start talking about it, assumptions are made that there is cognitive thinking behind it, that some logical process is at play, but not with Joe Biden. He is arrogant. And the key to Biden's arrogance is the notion that because he believes something to be, it therefore is automatically. And his foreign policy is premised on the notion that American democracy is the jewel of the world. There is nothing better than American democracy. And indeed, he's held 2 summits of democracy where America will invite, remember the colonial relationship? Hello, little colonialists, come in, come in, come in. Yes, we deem, not you, you're not good enough for us. Not, you were last year, but not this year because we're America and we get to pick the minions that come around us and will gleefully look at me while I describe the shining city on the hill. Meanwhile, the minions are looking around going, this ain't a shining city, dude. This is a ghetto, and that's sewage down there. You need to fix some of these problems. I couldn't get here on time because I had to wade through a sea of homeless people out there who have no jobs, no food. It's pathetic. Drug addiction. You name it, we got that problem in America today. But Biden can't admit that. Now, he has said, we have some problems, but we're fixing them. But we're still the best in the world. You know, I haven't been to Moscow for a long time. I think the last time I was there was in 1991. And what I've heard is that it has changed. Yeah. And Moscow is not the city. In 1991, I liked it. I thought it was a pretty cool city. I know in the 90s, things got bad and all that kind of stuff. But people are telling me now, you wouldn't recognize it if you got here. And, they say, and of course, Russian propagandists, because they have to be. You know, come on. Really, Moscow, there's no homeless in the streets? Come on, it's Russia. There's got to be homeless. Moscow, no potholes. No, it's Russia. There's got to be potholes. The roads can't be maintained. You're telling me that there's lights and it works and it's beautiful and there's city planning and there's stuff going on? No, it's Moscow. It's the Russians. It can't be, but it is. That's the reality. The shining city on the hill today is probably best defined by Moscow. Or at least Moscow better defines the shining city on the hill than anything that exists in America today. I would advise Joe Biden I wouldn't advise him because he'd probably get mugged. But if you walk out of the White House and you go down 14th Street or K Street or any one of the streets around you and just walk for a couple blocks and you didn't have your Secret Service detachment protecting you, you'd be mugged. You'd be robbed. My daughter lives in Washington, D.C. She's going to graduate school. People are randomly shot on her street, which is in a good part of the town, not because they were doing anything wrong, simply because they were living their lives. They come out of a restaurant and they get hit by a bullet. They're walking to work and they get hit by a bullet. Why? Because there's drug gangs and everything running around having gunfights. That's the shining city on the hill that Joe Biden is trying to sell to the world. Man, even the best used car salesman in the world couldn't sell that piece of junk. And that's the problem. Biden's trying to sell a piece of junk, and the world is starting to recognize that it's a piece of junk, and they don't want to buy it.
How do you assess the change in freedom of speech in the West after the start of the Ukrainian conflict? Why, in your opinion, are American and European journalists willing to sacrifice the principles of journalistic ethics in order to broadcast Washington's propaganda?
Well, they sacrificed journalistic ethics back during Iraq, and they never got it back. It's all about, they stopped being investigative journalists. The thing about journalism is the way it used to be practiced is that the truth was more important than profit, that informing the public. So, for instance, when you looked at CBS Evening News, it was a department within the CBS entertainment industry, but it wasn't designed to make a profit. They knew you were going to lose money, but you wanted to be seen as the credible news source so you could attract an audience during that critical evening news time, attracted by Walter Cronkite. Everybody trusted Walter Cronkite because Walter Cronkite tried to tell the truth to people. And then once you had them captive, then you could put on your TV shows, Leave It to Beaver and da-da-da-da. And what you want to do is have people watching your news program, and that transitions into that golden moment after news time where shows are there and all the advertising, your advertising revenue. So the news was the magnet for the viewership, but the money came from the advertisement in the programming after the news. But then came the 24-hour news cycle. CNN came in. And that changed everything, because what happened with CNN is they were just constantly telling news. People weren't waiting until 6 o'clock to watch Walter Cronkite anymore. At 12 noon, they could turn on CNN and get the news. And then at 1 o'clock, they could get something different. And at 2 o'clock, well, they might have to watch 1 o'clock again, but if something happened at 3 o'clock, they'd get something different. And CBS Evening News is going, man, we're losing viewership because they're getting their news elsewhere. How do we get them back? We got to spice it up. So instead of telling the news, they started to generate even more dramatic headlines than what 24 News Cycle was doing. So they compromised their integrity to bring in viewership, and news stopped being about the truth. And then what happened is they said, well, we got to make money out of this. And so news became a profit-making thing. The news department had to make money. And two things will happen. One, if you try to maintain your integrity, they're going to shrink it, because they're not going to underwrite people that aren't making a profit, because telling the truth sometimes is hard. People don't want to hear the truth. Sometimes a story takes 30 minutes to tell, but you only have 3 minutes. And then sometimes when you try to tell the story in 3 minutes, you're told you only have 30 seconds. And so everything gets dumbed down. And we don't have journalists today. We have entertainers. Every person in the media business is an entertainer first and foremost. Nobody tells the news anymore. And in the print media, it's the same thing. People like Seymour Hersh, who's the world's greatest investigative reporter, should go down in history and praised as such. Nobody wants him today, because Seymour Hersh writes things you can't publish. Why can't you publish it? Because your advertisers don't want that, because that is controversial. Your advertisers want people to buy something, not because it's controversial and telling the truth, but because it entertains. So everything gets dumbed down, packaged down, oversimplified to attract viewership, not for spreading the news, but for getting there so they can see the advertisements. So scandal, sex, drugs, blood, I mean, you name it. And if it's not that scandalous, make it more scandalous. If it's not that bloody, make it more bloody. And that's what they've done. And so this transitioned into the Ukraine conflict. And then we get back to what I talked about, the Putin whisperers. I mean, how can you report on a topic if nobody understands what it is? How can you report on Russia if you don't know what Russia is? I mean, and you take a look, these news networks, people in the New York Times was advertising a while ago for a Moscow bureau chief. But the advertisement wasn't for somebody who could get in there and understand society and all that. It was somebody who could get in there and basically report the scandals based upon the standards set by the New York Times. They didn't want a reporter. They wanted basically a stenographer who can basically take down the notes, package it up, feed it back to them so that entertainment can be. That's where we are right now. Now, anybody who challenges that becomes the enemy. That happened to me in Iraq. I went against the narrative. I was telling the truth. I became the enemy. So I had to be attacked. And I was. And now let's take a look at Russia. Again, I don't claim to be the world's best Russian expert. But I will tell you this. I'm in contact with a lot of Russian people. And sometimes they hold me to account. Trust me. If I say something, they go, nah, wrong. And they'll let me know where I'm wrong, why I'm wrong. And I appreciate that, because I don't claim to know everything. But generally speaking, they say, you got a good grasp of it, man. You're doing all right. You're doing okay. You tone it down here. You can beef it up here. But by and large, you're doing all right. And when a Russian tells you you're doing all right, you're doing all right. And not because they want propaganda. The Russian people are hungry for the truth.
Yes.
They are hungry for the truth, and they are intolerant of lies. And so if I was out there just spewing pro-Russian propaganda, they'd throw me out. They'd say, no, we get enough of that at home. We don't need that now. We want the truth. We want people to dig for the truth. They're hungry for it. The American people aren't. We're not hungry. We claim to be, but we're not. We might be hungry for the truth for sports, I have to tell you. I mean, my God, we got the Super Bowl coming up, and I can guarantee you all the football fans are out there digging for the truth about injury reports and this and that and the other thing, because they care. But they don't care
because
about
they got fantasy football as well.
Well, that's what I said. They care. They care about it. You got to have fantasy football. You got to get your performance out there. Did I pick the right guy for this week? A lot of research goes into that. But no, you don't want to research about Russia and foreign policy and things that lead to lives lost and trillions of dollars wasted. So now that the truth becomes, you talk about freedom of speech. Look, we're having this conversation right now, and nobody's kicking down my door yet. All right, they haven't shut down the YouTube channel yet. But you have to be careful. I don't know where you're going to post this, whether it's on YouTube or something, but you can be deplatformed if you say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. Deplatformed. Twitter bans me. I was banned several times on Twitter for telling the truth. They even acknowledge today. They're starting to come out and say, nah, Bucha was a Ukrainian massacre. Even the West is saying that now because you can't hide the truth. The truth will out. You can only tell lies and spread lies so long. I was banned for telling the truth.
Yeah, your Twitter account was suspended when you were talking about this, while thousands of posts was unfounded accusations of Russia and Russian leaders allegedly do not violate the rules of the platform. So what do you think about all this?
What do I think of?
Your Twitter account being suspended and all the censorship on social networks, for example.
No, it's first of all, that's inconvenient. And, frankly, in this modern age where access to subscribers becomes important for income generation. There are different ways to earn a living now. And so let's say you have a Substack. I have a Substack, and I want to attract subscribers. Being on Twitter helps me attract subscribers. Being on Telegram helps me attract subscribers. Doing YouTube videos helps me attract subscribers. And if you get enough subscribers, then you can take your wife out to dinner, and it's nice. Or you can buy your kids a new pair of shoes, and it's nice. You're not going to, maybe there's some people out there that, earn a living. But it's supplemental because I write for a living. So I write in, for big publication organizations. They pay me a decent wage. I write for other things and get a supplemental wage. And when you put it all together, it works out. I can pay the bills. I'm not rich by any means, but I can pay the bills. But then what happens is you get attacked. I used to write for the American Conservative magazine. And I might have made $6,000 a year writing for them because it's not a main source thing. It's a supplemental income, but still $6,000. That's okay. I'll take it. That's before taxes, by the way. But so it's not as much as people think. It's barely 1 month. It's barely what you can survive on 1 month. But I was thankful for it. And it was interesting because I literally was contacted by my editor. And she said, my God, Scott, the article you wrote that was published that was the #1 article of the year. We got clicks. It was the greatest, most viewed article. You're great. We're ready to go. And then literally a week later, we have to let you go because you write for RT. Yeah, I write for RT, just like I wrote for the American Conservative, just like I wrote for Truthdig, another outlet that let me go. Now, here's the irony. The American Conservative, Truthdig, about as liberal as you can get. I wrote for both. What does that tell you? That maybe I'm balanced. Maybe I have no biases. I'm trying to tell the truth, and sometimes the truth is attractive. But then I write for RT. I will also tell you this: I make far less money writing for RT than I did for either one of these groups. That also tells you something. Everybody's like, Putin's paying your salary. Oh no, he's not. I wish he was, but he's not. It's not happening that way, guys. But both the American Conservative and Truthdig had heavy editorial input because they have to appease their funders. So if I write something, they would come back and say, nah, you got to tone that down. And sometimes I just said no, and I pulled the article and said, we'll move on to the next one because I'm not going to make the changes. But oftentimes, because I have to live, I would make the changes they need without sacrificing the truth but soften things down to make it acceptable to funders. So they would publish the article so I could get paid. RT never did that ever, ever, ever. My relationship with RT is pretty simple. I put on my phone. I don't talk to him, but it's you know. So I text him. Hey, I got an idea. What if I write about this? What are you thinking? Oh, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, do it. Then I submit it. Thanks. They publish it. There it is. That's Russian propaganda control. That's the Pentagon or the Kremlin controlling me. There is no control. None whatsoever. The only times RT has said no to an article is when they deemed it to be too controversial for their American audience. I wrote a piece once that that talked about the what I deemed the extra constitutional tactics used by the Democrats to win the election. They said, "Oh God, it sounds a little too much like Donald Trump's election deniability." I said, "No. I'm just talking about the extra constitutional means that were done." They said, "We can't publish that." 2 weeks later, Time Magazine ran their front page story about the extra constitutional means that are being done. The exact same thing that I had figured out on my own and was writing about. But they didn't publish it because they didn't want to insult the American audience. They weren't trying to get me to push pro-Russian things. They were actually trying to get me to write things that would be more acceptable to an American audience. And the same thing about COVID. I wrote some stuff about the origins of COVID that turned out to be right. But they were like, no, we're uncomfortable with that. So they didn't publish it. But they never said, you have to write this. Vladimir Putin has said, you must say the following, and you have to write it. Never happened. It never would happen because I would never write it. But that's a long way of just saying that there's a lot more control in America. But censorship, because I wrote for RT, these guys dumped me. That's just a statement of fact. Not only that, but then the U.S. government passed money that was sent to Ukraine that was used to create something called the Center for Countering Disinformation.
Yeah.
And it worked for the Office of the Presidency. The State Department helped create it. The State Department funds it, and the State Department advises it. And they put out a blacklist. My name features prominently on it. I am a Russian propagandist, an information terrorist, and a war criminal. And this is the U.S. government saying that through the Center for Countering Disinformation. And then, if that wasn't enough, then my name gets put on the next list, the Mirotvorets list, the Peacemakers list. Ironic, isn't it? It's a hit list run by the Ukrainian intelligence service. They kill people on that list. That's the purpose of the list. If you're on the list, you are marked for literal death. I'm on that list too. I don't know the extent that the U.S. government makes that list possible, except that they do nothing to shut it down. I mean, normally you expect the U.S. government to say, man, you put an American citizen on your list, shut it down. That makes you a terrorist organization. But no, the U.S. government's like, yeah, so what? And this becomes a problem because now I'm on this list and it follows me wherever I go. And so if I try to have a speaking engagement to talk about the situation, pro-Ukrainian elements will show up and say, no, he's a terrorist. He's a propagandist. He's on the Center for Countering Disinformation list. But let me show you just how stupid that list is. First of all, it's an insult to the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Now, the First Amendment says that Congress can pass no laws that abridge the free speech of Americans. But when Congress passes a law that gives money to Ukraine to abridge the free speech of Americans, apparently that's okay. It's not. It's the same open violation of free speech. But the biggest crime that I was accused of by the Center for Countering Disinformation, number one thing was that I dared say that the war was a proxy conflict between NATO and Russia. That was my big crime. And for this, I should be killed. Except that the Ukrainian Minister of Defense came out last month and said the war is a proxy war between NATO and Russia. And that he said it's some Ukrainian forces that are dying, but they need NATO to give us more equipment because it's a proxy war between NATO and Russia. It's the same crime. So I fully expect his name to be right next to mine. And maybe he can join me on Mirotvorets and we can travel together in the same car so they can kill two birds with one stone. But they're not going to do that because, you see, his message is deemed to be convenient and part of the narrative. My message came out too soon. It was inconvenient at the time. That's a fact. There's no free speech. There's no free speech whatsoever. It's a constant struggle. Yes, I get to speak, but there's a price paid. Free speech should mean no, detrimental consequences. As long as you're saying the truth. I'm not saying jump up in the theater and shout fire. But for me, speaking the truth has tremendous consequences. It affects everything I do. It affects my ability to earn a living. And frankly speaking, it puts not so much me, because I don't care. You want to try and kill me? That's your business, because I'm pretty good at killing people too. So we can play that game and see who wins. But my family gets caught up in this, and they're scared. They're scared. They're nervous. And that's terrible. I mean, that's just, like I said, I'm a grown man. It's water off a duck's back. But when you terrorize my family, it becomes very personal. And so this is very personal to me, very personal. I'm making light of it, but inside it hurts a lot.
I hear you. At the end of last year, you stated that the true purpose of American intervention in the Ukrainian conflict is to damage Russia. Why, in your opinion, do Ukrainians not realize that they have become just a puppet in the hands of the United States?
Oh, I think they're realizing it now. I think there's a growing realization that they're about to be abandoned by the United States. If you take a look at what's going on in the mainstream media, the narrative is changing dramatically. Basically, almost overnight, everybody's saying Ukraine can't win this war. And they're not even saying Ukraine can't hurt Russia anymore, because Russia's going to win big, and everybody knows it. It's over for Ukraine. There's nothing NATO can do to stop it. And so, there's this narrative, and I think the Ukrainians are waking up to this fact. I mean, listen to Zelensky. If you don't give me the Abrams tanks by August, it's too late. Too late for what? For your birthday? I mean, can't go on vacation? I mean, what are you too late for? Because he knows that by August, it's over. Finished. Done. And I think the Ukrainian people are waking up. And so there's also reports coming now. The Ukrainian army, Zaluzhny, has come in and said, hey, this mobilization we're doing, it ain't working. Because even though you're giving me the bodies, the guys who are showing up on the front line don't want to be there. It's detrimental to morale, and they're either deserting or they're surrendering, but they're not fighting. So the numbers are artificial, because you're giving me people that don't want to play this game anymore. There's a recognition that it's all done. I wish they had this recognition earlier. I wish they would have had this recognition in the summer, when the United States was encouraging them to continue the offensive, et cetera. At that point in time, they should have said, look, we've already lost 20% of our country, and we're never going to get it back. What you're encouraging us to do is lose another 20% or more, and we'll never get it back. There's close to $1 trillion worth of infrastructure damage done back in the fall. By the fall, it's going to double soon, triple. Ukraine's going to be destroyed as a nation state by the time this is done. And I think Ukrainians are waking up to the fact that there won't be anything left of Ukraine. And I think this is, unfortunately, for the Ukrainian people, I think this is the intent of Russia. I mean, it didn't used to be. Remember, Russia entered this conflict, the special military operation, talking about our brother Ukrainians. But the conflict stopped being about Russia trying to get rid of the Nazis and all that, who do exist, by the way, in Ukraine. We can't pretend they don't anymore. Everybody openly acknowledges they're there. That's half the problem. Or corruption. I mean, now the Pentagon's telling the Ukrainian government, you must account for every penny we sent you. Every penny. And the Ukrainian government, we can't. It's all gone. 70% of what you gave us went into my pocket. Sorry, I have a secret bank account I'm not going to admit to. So it's the reality of Ukraine is coming out. But most importantly, when Ukraine allowed this conflict to be turned into that proxy conflict that the defense minister now acknowledges, this became a war between Russia and the collective West. And now Ukraine's just a battleground. And Russia is going to destroy Ukraine, because that's the only way Russia will be able to achieve its objectives. It's tragic. Tragic.
Can we say that the only chance for the United States to extend its hegemony is to push Europe and Russia against each other? What is happening now during the Ukrainian conflict?
Well, I mean, U.S. hegemony is based upon nations fearing other nations and seeking American military protection or economic protection to operate within the umbrella of security provided by the United States. But in order for that umbrella of security to be viable, there must be threats out there that are worthy of that. So the Russian threat to Europe is non-existent, literally non-existent. But the United States has made it out to be a threat, and we've been supported in that by Poland and the Baltic nations and former Warsaw Pact nations. But Russia is no threat. Again, we get back to what I call the Putin whisperers. They have failed. They thought that economic sanctions would break Russia. It's breaking Europe. They thought that Russia was weak because they misunderstood the initial phases of the special military operation where Russia didn't want to go to war against Ukraine. They said, well, that means the Russians can't fight. They're learning that Russia can fight. It does a pretty good job of fighting. And, you know, the exact opposite of what we wanted. We wanted economic sanctions to destroy Russia's economy, and we wanted a reinforced Ukraine to inflict so much pain on the Russian military that the Russian people would rise up against Vladimir Putin in what the West was calling the Moscow Maidan. I mean, that's the actual policy of the Zelensky government, is to create the Moscow Maidan. And the United States was backing that without any concept of what that meant. I mean, do you really want to overthrow Putin and create instability in a nation that has so many nuclear weapons spread out over such a large expanse? That's literally the dumbest policy the world's ever seen. Fortunately, it's not going to happen. Russia's a lot more resilient than that, and Vladimir Putin has never been more popular than he is today. So, you know, it's going to fail. But the question now is, what happens when this fails? What is the United States going to do next? And we won't know until we find out what Europe does. The key is Europe. And is Europe going to seek reconciliation with Russia, or is Europe going to rally behind the American security umbrella and maintain an aggressive posture towards Russia? I think they're going to seek reconciliation. I think eventually this is going to be the end of NATO, and the United States is going to have to withdraw from Europe as a military power. But that will take some time to come. And until then, the United States will continue to sell Russia as a threat worthy of confronting with expansion.